Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in Unidos con Kamala. I'm Enrique Davis Maslum. I am the Unidos US Action Fund State Director in Arizona, and we want to welcome you. I know we have people from all over, from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast and other parts of the world that are US citizens that live abroad and are joining us today. And we want to thank you all for joining us. We're very excited because Vice President Kamala Harris announced today her running mate. And with that, I want to introduce our president of Unidos US Action Fund, Janet Murguia, who's, I know, very excited for being here with us. And thank you, Janet. And we'll let you welcome everyone.
Well, thanks a lot, Enrique. It's just wonderful to be here and to be here on such an exciting day. It's been an exciting last week and a half, but today we heard the big announcement around the vice president, her announcement to announce her vice president candidate. And that was very exciting. Some of you may have been watching earlier when that all happened in real time in Philadelphia earlier. And so it is an exciting day, Enrique. We're thrilled. I'm pleased to say that I did hear from Governor Walz earlier this past week, who was eager to connect around some of the issues we've been working on in Minnesota, but also sharing with me a lot of the engagement he's had with the Latino community. And this is super exciting. I'm really thrilled. And of course, we're excited about the fact that we're going to have a strong, incredible, historic ticket for the Democratic Party as we approach the 90-day mark to Election Day. So I know some of you who are on across the country, and as Enrique states, have other parts of the world are following this. But for us, we really want to just say a couple of things. It's exciting to see this announcement today, but to remind folks that for us, Kamala Harris has been a longtime friend to our community, an advocate on so many issues that we are invested in, and someone who knows us. One of the things that's exciting as someone who's Latina, someone who's witnessed her work firsthand as Attorney General, then as Senator, then as Vice President, we've seen that she first and foremost understands the immigrant experience. No one will have to talk to her about what that means. And she's already been very engaged on a number of fronts to make sure that the is actually doing things that will support our work in that space, as immigration continues to be an issue that we see will be used by the Republicans and by Donald Trump in a way that will be very divisive. But more importantly as well, she knows all the issues our community cares about, whether it's about jobs and the economy, whether it's about access to healthcare and education, helping promote workforce skills and helping small businesses. Maybe it's civil rights and voting rights. She's been with us on this journey as a community. And it's very exciting to see the potential for history to happen. Not only a first woman ever elected president, a woman of color, and someone, again, who understands the immigrant experience firsthand. So for us, the issues that she cares about are the issues that we care about. And we've seen her in her role as vice president in the Biden-Harris administration take specific steps that we know have helped lift up our community, whether it was responding to the pandemic and making sure that we were targeting resources to those most in need and actually engaging and passing with Congress in a bipartisan way tax credits that were focused on working families, child tax credits that in the end have lifted over 40% of our Latino kids out of poverty. And maybe it's the uptake on the vaccination rates that we saw help save many in our community. Or maybe it's the fact that we saw the unemployment rate go from nearly 20% to now less than 5%. You can look at every issue in every area, and you can see real progress that has been led under her administration working alongside President Biden. And on that front, I just want to thank President Biden for the incredible leadership he has provided during these past 4 years. And now we see Vice President Harris emerge as the lead candidate, again, 90 days out from the election, and we can point to a record that has had positive impact on our community. But more importantly, Enrique, I really want all of our folks on this call tonight to understand that Vice President Harris, and now with candidate Governor Walz at her side, have already shared how their vision for the future is one that will bring more economic prosperity. They care about working families, and they don't want us just to be able to get by. They want us to be able to get ahead. And she understands the direct threat that former President Donald Trump poses for not only our community, but for the whole country. And I think she has really articulated a clear vision for how we can build a path forward and how important it is to move forward and not go backwards, whether it's on women's rights and reproductive health, or whether it's immigration and the extreme actions that have been promoted by President Trump, including mass deportations on day one, should he get elected. I mean, these are things that we know she cares about and are important to us. And we want to be able to join her in this positive path forward and never go backwards. So this is an exciting day for us. We're happy and thrilled on behalf of the UNIDOS US Action Fund to host this call that will help us to better understand some of the different issues that are at stake, but also hopefully raise a few dollars loud and clear for the Action Fund to continue to do its work in these next 90 days so that we can engage fully our community, mobilize our community, and actually see the highest historic outturn of Latino voters ever in the history of this country. We can do that. You all can help us do that, and we can do it together. And this is really just an exciting time. It is momentous that we can be part of this call on such a big day today, where Vice President Kamala Harris announced her vice president candidate. But we've got work to do to make sure we can get them over the finish line. And whether that's in key states that we know are going to be swing states, or whether it's wherever you are, we want to make sure we have a strong showing by our Latino voters and make sure that they're able to participate. Enrique, I know you've been doing a lot of work in Arizona. What do you see happening there? And
so there's much excitement in Arizona, especially because our Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be here on Friday. And also the candidate, Governor Walz, is also going to be here with her. And there is excitement. It totally changed, 180-degree change. People are excited. People in border communities that normally were not participating, they're like, okay, can we go to Phoenix and be with the vice president? So I think that is a very good sign of people like wanting to participate. They want to donate. They want to donate their time. So that is something that we need, because it's going to take everyone. In Arizona, we just had primary elections. There were races that were won by 10 votes, 42 votes. It's very hard. So every vote counts. Everybody doing their part. And we want to keep Arizona blue. We want to keep Nevada blue and Pennsylvania. So I know, Janet, that you've been doing this for many years and a lot of work. And I know we're going to see you here in Arizona pretty soon. And we're going to be meeting with a lot of affiliates and organizations that want to participate and do things with UNIDOS US Action Fund. And we are ready for that.
Yeah, it's going to be states like Arizona and Nevada, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. We know that there are states, because of the Electoral College, are going to be incredibly important. And we plan to show up and make sure that that Latino vote not only is a big difference, but the difference in the outcome of those states and in the outcome of this election. So much at stake for us and our communities. We need to understand that we can play an important role, not only in dictating that future, but in making history. We have a chance to elect a woman president, a woman of color, and someone who understands our immigrant ties as families and experiences. No one will have to explain that to her. She understands what that means. And she is someone who's not been a stranger to our community since day one, when she was a district attorney, attorney general, U.S. senator, and as vice president. She's been there with us and participating in our communities and in our events. So for us, this is the time for us to act and make sure that we can raise the funds that need to be raised so that we can do this critically important work. We know that there will be a very clear choice on election day. It's going to be crystal clear. There won't be any gray area in between. And really, it's about our direction as a country and as a community. Do we move forward and upward in our trajectory, or backward and on that dark path that we saw him disastrously lead the country when it came to our economic well-being and our families and communities being able to stay together and unified. So for us, there's a very clear choice ahead, so much at stake when it comes to our health, our education, our well-being, the workforce opportunities, the small business, the economics, the jobs. They're all on the line. And we have a clear champion in Kamala Harris. And now someone who is joining that ticket, who comes from a centrist background, but has very clear understanding of making the issues and acting in Minnesota in ways that have been very inclusive and representing progressive ideals. So this is someone who seems to be the right balance and fit for Kamala Harris. And
I think we got you back, Janet. Thank you.
Sure. So I know we're going to hear from some other folks, right, Enrique?
Yes, we're going to hear several folks. One of them is Carlos Eduardo Espina, who is like awesome, explaining many things on immigration. Thank you, Carlos, for joining us. We got to see him, Janet, in DC when the president signed the executive orders on mixed status families. Carlos was there. So, and we're very glad that he's here with us because he has very different perspectives on what to do. And he's followed a lot by many young people. And I think it's very important to have him here and talking with us. Carlos, welcome. Bienvenido.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. This is so awesome.
Well, thank you. And
Carlos, you know firsthand about the importance of that executive order that the president, the Biden-Harris administration supported and took action on. We've understood that for so long. It's been the long-term undocumented families, particularly those who have been spouses to U.S. citizens for more than 20 years. And we understand how important it is for them to finally be welcomed and come out of the shadows in our communities, and how important that is to the economic future of these communities and to the country. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that executive action, I guess, looking forward also really highlights the difference we have in November, right? Do we want to go forward or do we want to go backward? I think that's the slogan now. And, do we want someone, an administration building off what Biden's done for our community, who values the hardworking people who have been here for 10, 15, 20 years? Or do we want someone like JD Vance who says it's time to start packing, you know? So I think that executive action is the beginning of a lot of great things for our community. And I'm hopeful that we're able to, you know, elect Kamala Harris in November and then continue building off of that. Because while it did benefit a lot of people, I think we're also conscious that there's a lot of work to be done, but it's one step at a time. And that's something that's going to benefit over 500,000 in our community. And I think it's the right thing to do. So we're all really excited about it. And I'm sure y'all are as well.
Well, you know, your demographic is the demographic that people have been most worried about. Tell me about what excites you about this ticket now that we have a formal ticket today that is complete, the Harris-Walz presidential ticket. Tell folks what's exciting for you, since I know there are a lot of folks who've been worried about whether folks in your age group would turn out.
Yeah, well, I think what's excited me is that it's a different vision, you know, from what we're seeing on the other side. And I think the worries with President Biden is that, while he was very clear in his message, you know, just the way it would come off, the age difference and all that. And I was a big supporter of the president, but I think a lot of young people, at least what I'm seeing, are kind of feeling that connection. You see it a lot on social media as well, like the way the campaign is handling social media and hopping on trends and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a new, different type of energy. And I think it's a very, you know, I want to really applaud what the president was able to do, and, you know, take that courage to say, you know, now it's time for some new voices. And now that we have people providing those new voices is something that's excited a lot of young voters. I think right now also we're still like in a bit of a finding out, especially after Tim Walz. Many people outside of Minnesota really, I personally didn't really know much about him until today. So I think we're still at this stage where we're figuring things out. But I think the convention coming up is going to be a great opportunity. And then after that, once we start having the debates, especially because that's really what's going to resonate with people, you know, seeing the candidates, whether it be the presidential candidate or the vice presidential candidates, head to head, facing off with each other. I think people my age are really going to start to see the difference where maybe they didn't see it before. The way, you know, it was being framed previously, it's like, oh, it's a repeat of 2020. So like, it's, you know, no reason to be engaged. But now I think the differences are really going to show, and it's going to be really strong.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful. I know a lot of folks are going to be looking to our younger voters to make sure that they're participating, and your example and your leadership will mean a lot too.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's going to be great. So hopefully good things are coming. I know good things are coming. Not hopefully. I know.
No, well, thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Janet, for being with us. And just remind everyone that there's going to be several ways that you're going to be able to participate. It's either donating. We have a QR code. It's either volunteering. We're going to send you also links in the chat where you can sign up and volunteer. For those that are in New York, California, Illinois, and you're like, how can I help? My state is already blue, or even those that are in red states, right? But you want to make a difference, you're going to be able to volunteer with us and do phone banking, calling, texting, and make sure that people in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania go out and vote. So we'll be sending those links, so don't forget about that. And also, Carlos, one of the things that has happened with MAGA Republicans has been that they say that immigrants are taking over, right? That they're taking over the jobs. But in reality, immigrants are actually giving to this economy, right? They are the backbone. So can you tell us, like, from your perspective, what would you explain to other young people about this, right? So they don't go with that negative message.
Yeah, one thing I really try to do, especially on my platform, is, you know, learn from history. I think right now we have this conception, right, that or this impression that immigration is, or being pro-immigration is, a Democrat value and it's not a Republican value. But historically speaking, I mean, it's been an American value. Ronald Reagan's last speech as president, obviously I wasn't alive back then, but I can go on YouTube and check out. He talked about immigration and quite literally said the day that America closes its doors to immigration, is the day that we will cease to be one of the greatest country or the greatest country on earth. So I think educating people my age who maybe didn't grow up in a time where there was some sort of bipartisan consensus, and obviously there was never a time where we were perfect on immigration, but I think there were times when even Republicans could recognize and value, and it's not even that far back. Even George Bush has been very vocal being pro-immigration on certain topics. So I think it's really doing that work of informing and saying, hey, this isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a pro-America Kamala Harris versus anti-America Donald Trump. And I know it's a very strange framing to do when you've had this guy say, Donald Trump saying for years and years, I'm the pro-America guy. But if you really look at the values, not only on immigration, but on democracy, on other, it's the exact opposite. Kamala Harris is the candidate, is the person who is going to push forward these American values. So I think we need to do a good job of, informing younger generations of what America used to kind of look like on the issue of immigration and go back to having some decency on the topic. Like I said, these are American values, not just Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, I was really, really excited to hear tonight the theme of freedoms and the importance of freedom being the key message behind this Democratic ticket. And the fact that, for a long time back in the day, you mentioned it, Carlos, I am old enough to remember Ronald Reagan. And that used to be something that the Republicans cared about. But now it feels like they're interested in taking away rights as opposed to allowing folks to make independent decisions about their own bodies for women and other areas that are become so crucially important. So freedom is a theme that we ought to make sure we recognize is very much on the ballot, and an important reason for us to make sure we show up on election day and make sure we're contributing and donating to the Action Fund and to candidates that we believe will champion our interests in freedom, like Vice President Harris and Governor Walz.
Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, is really important. I think focusing on the more local races as well, like the congressional seats, Senate seats, a lot of times, especially people in my generation, we have a very limited understanding of how politics works. We get frustrated with the president because he's not doing everything he said he was going to do on the campaign. But a lot of times it's not that simple. You need a House and you need a Senate that can work for you. And you might live, like in my case, I live in Texas. Hopefully, we're able to flip it blue at the state level. But there's a lot of local races, congressional districts that are up in the air, especially, in the Valley, down in the RGV, places like that, that we can really do some good work. And if we deliver the presidency, but we aren't able to deliver the House and the Senate, a lot of these things will still get, stuck, and we'll go back to that frustration. So I think there's also a lot of work to be done on the educating side. And, you might not feel inspired to vote for president for whatever reason it may be, but hey, there might be a Senate candidate you're really into, or there might be a House candidate you're really into, or even something even more local, governors, mayors. All of those things matter. So I think this election, we really have to focus up and down the ticket, and that's always important. But I think this election, it's particularly important.
Hey, I see someone there, Enrique.
Yeah, so Renata, she's the chair of our UNIDOS US Action Fund of the board, and she's in Tennessee. And Renata, when we started talking about let's put this together, she was like, yes, I need to get all my Tennessee people to help out and get involved in all of this. So thank you, Renata, for being here with us. And Renata, one of the things that we started talking about is also on the immigration part, but also how does the Supreme Court going to affect all these decisions, right? On immigrants, LGBTQ plus community, women's rights. We just saw that. So Renata, we started talking about all this. So I don't know, jump in and welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you, Janet. Good to see you, Carlos. I feel the energy just here. It's amazing how you can feel it even through Zoom, right?
And in a red state.
So let's talk about that first, right? I'm here because I hear a lot of my colleagues and Latinidad aquí in Tennessee and across the South, who we often feel that our vote doesn't count. We're not in a battleground state. We are in red states. So sometimes it feels that really our voice and our vote doesn't matter. And that's why when we started talking about this call, I got very excited, because I know that it does. And I know that it does not just for when I cast my ballot here, but also for what I can do to support the movement in other states. So I'm showing up here today because, of course, I'm going to vote for our future president, Kamala Harris, in November. But I'm also here because I want to do all I can to support my Latino brothers and sisters in Arizona, in Nevada, in Pennsylvania. I know that there's way more, and it's the way it is. And so I'm here to see how I can volunteer, how I can donate, how I can educate myself about this issue. So when people ask, or to Carlos' point, when people feel like, but really doesn't make a difference, we can really be more informed about the ways in which it does. And so I'm also excited that we are here to talk about all the ways in which the progress that we had moved towards is going backwards, and the ways that in which this election we can make it back. So I know that we are joined by Representative Lorena Austin from Arizona. And Lorena, I'm very excited to meet you because, you know, I'm here in Tennessee. I can tell you from one friend, Dr. Roberto Espinosa, one of many trans men in Tennessee that I know that left this state because they did not feel welcome, they feel threatened, and they felt that they needed to go somewhere else in the US because we could not keep them here. And so I am very concerned. People like Roberto, a doctor, an intellectual, an academic, is no longer part of our community because what we have done in Tennessee. So I would love to hear from you. What would you like to see, and what you do think is possible with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket to protect our LGBTQ communities, and not only to protect them, but to create communities where we all can thrive and we all feel that we belong?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Again, Arizona State Representative Lorena Austin. In 2022, and I'm so glad we're talking about this issue, I was the first Chicana non-binary legislator elected in the entire country. So I think that shows us how intersectional and unique our entire community is. And so I'm so happy to be here because there is a clear difference and a clear line of demarcation between a Harris presidency versus a Trump presidency. I serve here in the state of Arizona. I'm a fifth generation Arizona. So proud. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants, farm workers. And what we're seeing in Arizona is quite concerning. And we are one of the big swing states that are going to have all eyes on this presidency and this election cycle. And I can tell you, they are bringing back the most horrible policies that we've ever seen. Right now on our ballot here in Arizona, Prop 314 is on our ballot because there was a way to bypass our Democratic governor, which is SB 1070, an even worse version of SB 1070, which we popularly, unfortunately, know as a show me your papers law here in Arizona. And that just decimated our community 14 years ago. I mean, it profiled our people, it separated families, and it turned our state into an economic disaster that we're still recovering from. So there is a very clear difference about what will happen if Vice President Harris isn't elected. I think it will really embolden state legislatures. Ours is currently controlled by a Republican majority, even though we have a Democratic governor. And to Carlos's point, it's very important that we're paying attention to these state legislative races, because if we don't flip these legislatures, I fear the Republicans will just be even more emboldened by an extremist presidency that will allow them to do whatever they want. I mean, we're seeing Supreme Court protections being rolled back at the federal level también. And so we don't know what will happen. And it's not to stoke fear among us, but there's a very, real task for us at hand that we need to meet. We need our young people to vote. We need to have people understand that their voice is powerful and it matters. And, 30 years ago, you would never imagine Arizona could flip to blue. It would be the wildest dream. Someone like me shouldn't be serving in the legislature in 30 years ago, right? But it's possible, and it's possible because of our ancestors and because of generations of power before us. So I just want people to know that's kind of the state of affairs here in Arizona, and we have such important issues on the line. So that's why I am so emboldened and want to empower everyone that a Harris presidency will be progress and will not send us back.
Lorena, you know, when you say that, I want to share with you that every time here in Tennessee, we feel the doom of like the weight of all the things that we want to change. I always point to Arizona and the organizing that has happened that has made people like you being now in elected office. I know the organizing that took place against SB 1070 and the flip, not only of leaders, but really the narrative and the conversation about feeling our own power. I want to hear, like, so do you feel the energy in your community? Like, do you, like, in the last week, do you feel the difference?
Oh, 100%. It's like a whole new era is here, and we need that. And we need that. I've had people reach out to my office, you know, and we're campaigning this year, and people are wondering, how can I get involved? How can I knock doors? I mean, just the energy around it has really, I think, really left something for us to desire and create hope again, right? Because that's what we need. That's what we needed. I mean, I just felt the air come out of so many rooms, you know, especially, you know, after certain events happened and the infamous debate and all these things. And now I think people see this pathway forward, and especially for LGBTQ plus people, incredibly important, because we know VP Harris supports things like the Equality Act, right, which will bring so many protections to the LGBTQ plus community. And now her VP pick with Governor Walz, I mean, that's major because they have such a long history of supporting this community. So it brings me so much hope, you know, to know that one day maybe I can still get married, because if we don't have a Harris presidency, I sincerely believe that will never happen for me. And also, I think, you know, I might have to reconsider where I live, and I'm not leaving. And so I'm going to ensure everything I can that not just me, it's not about me, but it's about my people who are indigenous to this community, who have come to build their lives for their families, good, hardworking people. They deserve to stay right where they are. And we are so happy to have each and every one of them. So that's what it means for our community.
Thank you, Lorena. And that's a great segue to our next guest who just joined us too, Eunice Ortiz, a civil rights Boricua in Florida. Welcome.
Hello.
And on this issue that you bring up, that is not just a blanket attack on our LGBT community, but also in particular also the threat of losing gay marriage. Mm-hmm. And we know that from the Supreme Court's decision that took us back 50 decades, and now women don't have the right to a safe abortion and to decide for our own bodies. I want to mention that in the most recent poll from UNIDOS, we saw that for the first time, abortion show up in the top priorities, in the top 5 priorities for our Latino community as a concern. We understand that this is not just an issue of individual rights, but also of public health, of public safety, of our ability to make decisions that are right for our families, for our communities. And so I wanted to ask you, Eunice, what would you, how would you feel that the Harris administration could address to protect so that we don't go back, so that we don't lose same-sex marriage, contraception, the right to access to contraception, and that we actually move forward to regain the right of women to decide for ourselves?
Yeah, thank you so much. My wife and I, one of the reasons we actually got our marriage license in New York State and not Florida was because of the threat of that SCOTUS decision. If marriage is overturned, same-sex marriage in Florida immediately becomes illegal. And all licenses will no longer be valid. And that's the same for many states across the country. You can assume which states those are. Why a Harris administration? Vice President Harris is the only one running for president between Vice President Harris and Trump that actually supports the LGBTQ community. Vice President Harris is the only one that supports same-sex marriage, that supports same-sex adoption, that supports trans and non-binary folks to live in the gender identity they choose, and they are. So why Vice President Harris? She's the only one with us. She's the only one that is supporting the LGBTQ community, but she can't do it alone. And there's a comment in the chat that I want to uplift, that local and state legislative races are equally as important. A lot of the attacks, and Rep. Austin pointed to this a little bit, that we have seen against the LGBTQ community have started at the state level. We have seen some of these state races be lost by 1 vote or even worse, be a tie where it's a flip of a coin. It's a draw out of a bowl to who wins that seat. And that literally determines the majority. We saw that in Virginia in 2017. It determines the majority of an entire House of Representatives. These elections are vital because it shapes the narrative of how legislation is going to be pressing forward. So why a Harris administration? Because with Kamala Harris as our president, with Walz as our vice president, and a majority in Congress and a majority in the US Senate, we will see change throughout the country as it comes to LGBTQ rights, as it comes to abortion rights, as it comes to immigration, as it comes to everything vital to all of our communities. And I'm not surprised, though I am a little bit surprised that you were saying the polling that UNIDOS has, that abortion's at the top. Abortion and reproductive health care has always been an important issue in the Latino community, but maybe now folks feel like they can talk about it. Maybe now folks feel like they can have the conversation in their community that they have and need the access to this reproductive care that has always been there, but they haven't been able to have the conversation because leaders like Kamala Harris are bringing it to the center to say, this is what we need in this moment. We are not afraid to talk about it, and we're going to continue to press forward until everyone has access to this healthcare.
Thank you. Sometimes it's crisis and the moment of being at the edge of losing something that we have, and so we need all of us to understand that's what's at stake here. Thank you, Nick and Lorena, for sharing your story. I have more reasons to show up for voting this November.
Yeah, there are many reasons why we should be worried. And like the vice president said today, it's a decision for long term, right? We're not going to be picking a president and a vice president just for 4 years. We have to think about this long term, what's going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years. Depending on who gets elected, that's the shape the US is going to take. And before we move on with these guests that we have, I wanted to bring a question to all of you related to immigrants and refugees who are also LGBTQ, single mothers. Like, what's the effect for them and those that are seeking a better future for their families? A lot of us that joined, or a lot of us that came to the US, it's because we wanted a better life, right? We wanted something better for us, for our families, and that's why we're here. Many of our family members who came before, it was the same reason. And we see this happening day in, day out, but I wanted to get your point of view on what are the issues that are of most concern to immigrants. And we'll also add Carlos to this call, or to this section, sorry. Go ahead, whoever wants to start.
I mean, I'm happy to start. This is Janet again. And again, I really appreciate the voices represented on this call. And just a reminder for folks too, that I'm also speaking in my role as president of the UNIDOS US Action Fund, as I wear a couple different hats. But look, we've been seeing a lot of focus and the use of immigration by Donald Trump and the Republicans right now in a way that would be very extreme and divisive. And while we may not have agreed with everything with President Biden, what we have understood is that there was a recognition of the big contrast between the two approaches. And that's for everyone in looking at these individuals who are coming over either on their own or with families, and understanding that there are basic human rights that have to be respected and observed. And that lens was brought by the Biden-Harris administration. And the contrast with Donald Trump has been one of really seeing this effort to not even acknowledge these folks as human beings, this reference to any and all immigrants as animals and as criminals, and the dehumanization is palpable. We've seen that over and over again. So when it comes to being able to actually seek refuge from countries that will not allow folks to be who they need to be, to make that choice about who they want to be, we see a direct contrast between the policies of Donald Trump, whether they were in the past or the promises that he has promoted on day one, and what we've seen in terms of the Biden-Harris administration that has brought a lot more empathy, compassion, and humanity.
Thank you, Janet. Lorena, we're like short on time, so if your answers can be like really quick, go ahead. And then we'll go to Nick and then Carlos.
I mean, immigration is so complicated. I know it because I got my degree in immigration policy from college, but I think the United States has to take accountability for the part we've played in this and the problem with immigration and how we have led to destabilization of other countries that have led to the influx of refugees coming to seek asylum or for whatever other reasons, right? And again, it's very complex, but there are not perfect solutions, but for example, there is the first bipartisan immigration, reform bill at the federal level that has so many dollars attached to it because we need more resources when it comes to attorneys, caseworkers. There's just such a backfill of cases that we're not able to get to. And it's, infuriating even to me. I mean, we have a broken system, but there are things we can do to help navigate that system, but it's not happening because Trump literally said, don't help solve immigration because then I can't run on that issue because it is such an issue across the country that people care about, and rightfully so. But we have to understand that we are dependent upon our immigrant community. They literally hold up America, and we have to figure out a way to help solve this very difficult challenge. But it's just such a complex issue. But I will say there is a big difference between treating this issue in a humane way, which it needs to be, and we have to take ownership of that, versus an issue that will literally just drive out droves of communities that are so important to the fabric of America. So I'll leave it at that, but it's just incredibly important that we elect a presidency that's going to tackle this issue head on in a humane way, in a way that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Nick?
Thank you. Echoing everything that's been said, and it goes without saying that the policies of Project 2025 and of the former Trump administration are rooted in racism and hate. The policies, their immigration policies, are rooted in racism and hate. We cannot afford, allow, or accept an administration that is going to govern by racism and hate. That's the bare minimum. And that should be the bare minimum of whatever we are supporting and pushing forward for the future of our country. Like you said, Enrique, it's not the next 4 years. This is for generations to come. We say it every year, and I feel like a broken record at this point when I say it, but this is one of the most, if not the most consequential elections of my lifetime, of many lifetimes over. It will literally paint the picture that cannot be repainted of what our immigration policy looks like and what so many issues will look like for years, decades, and generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Carlos?
No, I think something Janet said is very important to frame it in a way. I think people need to understand, as much as I support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they're not perfect. No politician's perfect, and we can't get this false optimism, right, that they're going to fix all of our issues. That's just not the case. But when you look at what they're proposing compared to what the other side is proposing, you have to think in the future, where would I rather be, with an administration who might not get everything done, might not be perfect, might be things that we're against, but overall is advocating for our community and trying to provide better opportunities for us, or what we've seen, what Trump is saying, what J.D. Vance is saying, and the impact that's going to have not just over the next 4 years. I forget who it was that mentioned the Supreme Court. I mean, this next administration is going to probably get to put some more people on the Supreme Court. And for example, when I'm from Texas, and when you have people like Greg Abbott saying, oh, we were able to challenge the state's rights to abortion, now let's challenge states' rights to give education to illegal alien children, according to him. That's his words. You have to think, okay, maybe I'm not a huge fan of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, but I want my kids to be able to go to school. I want there to be public education. I want, equal access and opportunities. So I think it's really, that's the framing. I think tonight at the rally was something that resonated with a lot of people, and it's we're not going back. And I think that's the message. We're not going back. We're going forward. And yeah, progress takes time. Progress is bumpy. It's not going to be a perfect, straight line. But I think with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, we'll move in the right direction. Whereas with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, we'll go the complete opposite way. That's the way I'm framing it. And I think that's the way most people will understand it. So I think we have to win in November. There's no other way.
So, Enrique, 6 million U.S. citizen kids have at least one parent who's undocumented. Donald Trump, if you remember, Republican convention floor when he accepted the nomination, the signs almost held to a person said mass deportations now. He's not satisfied that in his previous administration, he separated families at the border. He actually now wants to go into communities and separate families. How is that furthering the interests of our families, our communities, and economically of this country? This is a stark contrast. It's not even a close call in terms of what former President Trump has already proposed starting day one and what Kamala Harris and now Tim Walz have, the values and the policies that we have seen them support either through the Biden-Harris administration or in his role as governor of Minnesota, which has been for Governor Walz to actually allow undocumented students to have access to college. He passed that law in Minnesota, and to allow for undocumented individuals to have driver's license, because he knows that that's in the best interest from a security, safety, and economic future for the people of Minnesota, and apply that nationally. This is not a close call. We've got to get out there and make sure people understand not only the clear differences between these candidates, but also the sense of urgency for us as a community of voters to make sure we show up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought. Oh, go ahead, Renata.
I was going to say, I know that I have to leave soon, but I want to say that it's occurring to me that there was a time when 4 of us here would have not had the right to vote in this country, but women fought, and here we are. Now we can vote, and here we are about to elect the first woman president. And I think that, to me, I also think about, there was a time when you could have not married your partner, and now we can. And it also took decades of a lot of work, of a lot of people that advocated, that organized. And so we have to remember that these legacies of progress that are in front of us, that are fragile, is part of our generation's call to save, to protect, and see what's the next leap of progress, not protecting just what we already gained, but what's the future of our communities that we want. And that's why I'm excited to support Latinos in Arizona, in Nevada. I'm still going to support Luis Mata. Is a young Latino who will be the first state representative here in Tennessee. And of course, I'm supporting him, but I'm also supporting all the great work that UNIDOS Action Fund and all the organizations that are mobilizing our vote. And so I hope that everybody on this call is learning how they can volunteer, make calls to people in other states, and how we can donate and support the work that is happening everywhere in so many Latino communities, your own and across the country.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you for being here with us. And we have a great chair on the board, and we're very excited for all the work that's coming. And Janet, I'm glad you brought up the part of education, because 2 years ago in Arizona, we passed Prop 308, which was in-state tuition for dreamers. And there's still a lot of work that we need to do, like repeal Prop 203, which is English only. And I know Lorena is working a lot on that, and we're going to be asking Carlos to help us out with that in 2 years so we can actually change those things. But there is that support that is needed on the ground. We need to look at elections also at a local level, because that's what Republicans did, right? They started taking control of state legislatures, and that's how they managed to do a lot of harm. So now we need to get into that game and make sure that we also start having control in other states, or at least that conversation where you come and you make deals like between a bipartisan. And before we end this segment, I want to let Lorena speak and then thank all of you for being here. And then we'll start like moving, transitioning. And don't forget to donate, to volunteer. We're going to need all the help in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and other swing states. But we're going to do this job. Go ahead, Lorena.
Sure. I think, I'm going to plug for Arizona hard. Like I said, SB 1070 is back in a different form. It's Prop 314. It will be on the ballot here in Arizona. And if that is passed, it would be almost virtually irreversible. It would be even worse than SB 1070. It's actually modeled after SB 4 in Texas. And it's something that we will need so much help spreading the word here in Arizona to ensure that that can never see the light of day. It must be defeated. I'm very confident that we have the ability to do that because we've done it before, but this is a higher stakes, and I think everything really truly is on the line. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for being on this call today and know that it is going to take not just this Zoom call, but every single day until November 5th to make sure that we see a Harris-Walz presidency and administration. It's a non-negotiable for us. So I just want to thank you all again. Please support these massive, swing states and opportunities that we have to flip these legislatures blue and to really advance the priorities of all of our communities and specifically the Latino community because we do so much. Arizona is a third Latino here in the state of Arizona. And so our voices have extreme, magnitude and power. And so we have to, si se puede. I don't know if I've heard that yet, but si se puede. And Dolores Huerta was just here a few weeks ago and just galvanized our community here in Arizona. And so I'll leave you all with this saying from my family. We've said it forever, so take it with you forever go. But it's adelante, adelante, siempre adelante means forward, always forward. So that's exactly what we're going to do in November.
Oh, thank you. And Carlos, one of the things you were talking about is how we might not agree with the candidates on all the issues, but understanding that part, why should people mobilize in this election? Why do you think they should participate? And like, you're very influential in TikTok and Instagram. Like, what would you say to your audience and other audiences of why they should participate and mobilize? And what do you think they can do?
Well, I think for those of us who can participate, right, being so connected with millions of other people in our community who can participate is one, understanding our civic duty as U.S. citizens, those of us who are, to be able to speak for those who unfortunately, have never been able to acquire citizenship and then eventually vote. But beyond, hey, I might not agree with everything either candidate is saying. I think we really have to look at the long term, like I'm saying, to look at the things like the Supreme Court or what we want to build towards in the future. Maybe we might not get everything we want in the next 4 years, but is it going to be easier to achieve things in 5-10 years if we have a Harris presidency or if we have a Trump presidency? I think the answer is very clear. And I liked what Janet said. It's not even close. I think that's like a really good slogan as well. If we were talking about two moderate candidates, but we have one guy who's so extreme. I mean, you look at the things he's saying, he's completely deranged. I mean, it's just a threat to all our values and not just our community, the country as a whole, all our values, democracy. And, those of us who come from immigrant backgrounds, we think back. I asked my parents, why did you immigrate to the United States? For democracy, for freedom, for opportunities. If we lose all those things, and I mean, we're losing the country that many of us fell in love with. So I think that's really the message we have to emphasize. And like I said, going back, I mean, there has to be somewhere, no matter where you live in the country, somewhere up or down the ballot, there has to be at least one candidate that motivates you, that you identify with. It might even just be someone, who's running for state rep or state senate, but, really open your eyes, do some research and get involved with those candidates as well. Because even in those races, like we were mentioning, they get decided by 1 vote, 2 votes, coin tosses. I mean, you can really make a difference. And I think that's something we struggle with a lot. We feel like my individual vote won't matter. And maybe that's true, at a presidential level. I don't want to say it is, but at the state levels, like, that's definitely not true at all. There's so many races that are so close. So just find something that motivates you, or even think about it as issue based. What motivates me, and find another candidate. Because even within the Democratic Party, we have a lot of diverse ideals and candidates. And I think, part of that making history, supporting those candidates who are first women, first, whatever it may be, to any office. I think that can really motivate anyone. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to get motivated around. And I think right now saying I'm not motivated is a very bad excuse. It just means you haven't looked into the candidates enough. But I think there's enough to get motivated around, and I'm really optimistic for November.
No, really appreciate it. And we're going to be ending this segment. So, Unic, I'll let you finish. Carlos, thank you for being with us. And Unic.
Yeah, I was just going to say something Carlos said about my vote might not count for president, but it would count for state rep. Absolutely agree. And, in 2016, I was just looking up the numbers. There were about 5.3 million registered voters in Arizona. 2.6 million voted. 2.7 million decided to stay home. And that was a state that came very close. So you may think you're just one, but you are one of many. And if we galvanize, if we organize, if we get out and vote, get our friends to vote, I make it a brunch every year, right? Make it fun. You can do something and really organize and energize your community, whether it's 5 people or 500 people, to get out and vote, because you may think it's just one vote, but one vote multiplies real quickly.
You're completely right. And I think we need to start looking at things at a neighborhood level, right? If we try to organize massively, it's going to be hard. But if I start organizing with my friends, with my family, whether it's the carne asada, the tamales, or even hamburgers or hot dogs, right? And we all get together and decide to vote. Like, is it going to be sending your vote via email, via mail, or going to vote? But you need to organize. So that's what we need. I want to thank you for being with us. And before I close this section, Janet, anything else that you want to mention to all these followers that we have in UNIDOS US Action Fund and other organizations that have their C4 and how they can help?
Of course, yes. We've been talking a lot about, the importance of voting. Many of the organizations that we partner with, Mi Familia Vota, Voto Latino, Latino Victory Project, we're working in a way where we can help leverage our respective strength areas and really have a unified Latino voter mobilization effort. It's a very exciting opportunity that we have, where we've come together to see how we can best do that, because this is not about a competition. It's about leveraging all of our strength areas so we can have this turnout and vote. And again, the freedoms, the freedoms that are on the ballot this year are real. You've heard us touch on some of those topics. And, we've talked about some of the economic issues, the health issues, but, a reminder that former President Trump has pledged to end DACA, to eliminate the temporary protected status, to seek and implement the largest mass deportation effort in our history, putting all the families in their crosshairs. And remember, that's a threat to many of us who are U.S. citizens as well. In the sweep that occurred, similar to what Trump is proposing in the 1950s, there were citizens who were taken up who happened to be Latino, and all of that, those kinds of threats that would move us backward are on the ballot. And we can have the power, the agency to determine our future. And we can do that not just at the national level, but at the local and state level. These ballot initiatives, they all matter. They all can determine our direction, and we have the power to be able to determine our own destiny in this election. And so our future is on the ballot. You are on the ballot. So let's support organizations like the UNIDOS US Action Fund and others and let's get out there and let's vote, and let's make sure everyone knows that their vote will matter in November.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Janet, for being with us. And we're going to be introducing some other guests. We have Fred Sotelo, we have Carla Hernandez Matz, and we have Representative Gina Hinojosa. Thank you for being here with us. And I want to start out with a question for you is like, how can the Harris-Walz ticket enhance funding for K-12 education in Latino communities to better prepare students for the future? So, and we also have Max Arias here. So I know two of you are more experts on education. So who wants to jump in? And thank you for being here with us.
I'll jump in.
Oh, go ahead.
You're both excited. You're very excited.
We
Right?
are. So thank you so much, Enrique. Thank you so much, my friend. You know, we're super excited. I'm sure that you're gonna hear from, Hosa as well, that she's excited about everything that's going on, because this is just a pivotal moment. So I'll tell you that as a special education teacher, as a union leader in the state of Florida, where we've seen so many attacks on workers, when we're seeing how education is being attacked and hyper politicizing our classrooms, this is a breath of fresh air. We're so excited that not only is Governor Walz a former teacher, his wife is a former teacher, and he was a unionist. And so I can tell you that not only has he implemented, he's been on the front lines of education, making sure that we fight for public schools, that we get access to resources, but the things that have been implemented also in the state of Minnesota, the things that Vice President Harris has been pushing for. I have to tell you, mi gente, this is our time. Estoy emocionada. We have to get out and tell people that this ticket is going to be life-changing, not only in education and for working people, but for so many aspects that I know we've been talking about on this live stream, but also that we're going to continue to talk about. And I know that Representative Hinojosa also has something to say about that.
Well, Carla, you're the expert because you're the teacher. And I don't know if you all have experienced this in Florida, but I got together with my education people today in Austin, Texas, and the excitement for this ticket, it's almost like we can't believe how strong the embrace, the abrazo from the Democratic Party is for our public schools with this ticket. It is our biggest fight in Texas. We are now, as Latinos, a majority of the student body population in our public schools in Texas for the first time ever. Latinos are a majority. And at the same time, there's this renewed vigor in the Republican Party to privatize our public schools and to pass a taxpayer-funded voucher that would take money out of the schools where our kids are and divert that money into private school vouchers for the select few. That hits all our kids, my kids in public schools. Since the time Texas has been a state, it is in our state constitution. They have been entitled to the promise of opportunity that our public schools provide. But now that our kids are a majority, they're going after the money that funds our kids' education. And I don't think that's by coincidence. If Trump, God forbid, were to get elected, we know it would be that much worse because Trump is all about the art of the steal, right? Taking our money that our communities are entitled to and using it to line the pockets of himself and his friends. And so at a time when our community is so dependent on our neighborhood public schools and education is the opportunity that our parents fought for, and now that we have to fight to hold on to that. And this ticket with a former school teacher at the top of the ticket there with our Vice President Kamala is just a breath of fresh air and doubling down on our commitment to public schools as a Democratic Party.
So, and I'll continue. Thank you for those comments with technology and education and how this is important for businesses, and also like the part of labor. And I think Fred and Max, like when we start thinking of how we want our kids to be educated, but then choose a career path as they get older, some of them are going to decide to go to college, some of them are not. But there needs to be a base of education that everybody should receive, right? And they should be able to make those decisions, but also get fair, good paying jobs, even if they don't go to college. Like here in Arizona, we're getting built a TSMC plant that has to do with semiconductors. And a lot of the welders are going to be making over $100,000 a year, right? And they don't have to go to college, but is a job that is needed, that is going to be specialized. So what are your thoughts of making sure every kid in the US, it doesn't matter where they live, that they get a fair education, but they also have opportunities to get a decent, good paying job? You're both on mute. Max, go ahead.
All right, I'll jump in since you talked about jobs. And I'm with SCIU Local 99 in Los Angeles. We represent K through 12 workers and childcare providers. And nationally as well, we represent about 300,000. And let me tell you let's start talking about the jobs in the schools that need to be good. They need to be good paying jobs. We understand and we value our teachers, but our teachers couldn't do their work without clean schools, without children having food, without support staff that's supporting them in the classroom, bus drivers, etc. And those jobs are completely undervalued and invisible. And where I am here in LA, and mostly everywhere, it's work being done by women and mostly Black and brown women. It's work that we're expected our workers to educate children throughout the year, yet go without pay in the summer. And we're excited about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because they understand this. They understand what needs to change. We need to start funding education properly. You also raised, for example, the fair education. We believe excellent education for all children, regardless where they live, where they come from, regardless of ability or language, is imperative in the richest country in the world. And we know that the pathway there is clear with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because they intrinsically understand. And Tim Walz intrinsically understands schools in a different way and understands that we need to start funding education differently. We need to start ensuring that we fund it in an equitable way by supporting those students that need it the most. And so I think it's very important to talk about that and to know that which is the only ticket that can deliver on this is actually Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Because the other way, they're talking about privatizing education, Trump and crew. They're talking about creating voucher systems, such as the one that's in Louisiana. I think they actually had a bit of a failure, but trying to create voucher system, privatize systems, continuing to privatize education, not just privatize the work that teachers do, but right now they're privatizing every other position, such as bus drivers, etc., which leads to bad jobs. But privatizing education just continues to exacerbate and create a worse system in which only the haves will have access to that excellent education and everybody else not. When we talk about having jobs, as you said, it is important to ensure that there are various different types of work available, education available, whether it be technical, whether it be, want to learn to be an engineer, etc. However, when we talk about that, one thing that is missing is that we have to talk about equity in access to the opportunity to do what you want. Because many students, when we say, well, you're low income, so you should go into food service, which is it's a good work. But what if that child really wants to be an engineer? However, they don't have opportunity or access to do so. So we need to start creating equity to access. And I know, because I know Kamala Harris out here in California, we supported her in her campaign, all her campaigns to become senator, and then,
her like really well then, right? So it's like, I'm pretty sure you're very excited, and this part of education and what you said of we need to give everyone the opportunity to make a decision, right? And once you get to that part, then you go into the business section, right? Like, where are they going to work? And Fred, I know you want to like you're excited. We saw each other a couple weeks ago and we talked about this, but this totally changes things. So I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. I think, you know, I come from the small business community as well as being an activist, right? So there's an intersectionality between economic and social, you know, equity. And I think, first of all, with this, you know, the Biden-Harris administration have really looked at the term investment, starting with preschool, right? Without preschool, you know, that's the key is, and I think this team, this ticket will really double down on early childhood education because, you know, it's about a starting line, right? And if we could start our young people early, not at K through 12, but at pre-K. And then second of all, I think is critical, you know, is the before and after school programs, right? You know, a kid, we want to see them create a career path, but it's about belonging and having a safe and positive environment, right? That creates the child, right? In a good, nurturing environment. And I think, you know, we really have to look at, you know, where's that investment in our children from pre-K to after and before school. When you look at what this administration has done that is impressive is you look at their picks. You look at the SBA with Administrator Guzman, you know, our leader. You know, she's really looked at investment in small business and micro business. That's what our community is, right? It's a majority of us. And then you have, you know, Assistant Secretary Alejandro Castillo, you know, in economic development, where she's looked at what the future is here today. And that's lithium, it's renewable energy, it's tech, it's AI, it's chips. And so when you have leaders in the cabinet already that this administration put in place, you know, and naturally they'll look at the pipeline. How is the pipeline inclusive of these future jobs that are here today, right? And how do we create those pipelines starting at a young age so that our children are prepared to go into what their choice is, but also not be restricted if they want to go into engineering or if they want to be in the arts, they'll have that opportunity. And I think at the end of the day, this administration is our best bet when you use the word investment, specifically in education at the earliest level.
Perfect. Before I let you go, because we have a long lineup, and I know we said we were going to do this like firecracker, like really quick. So 2 words that say, or a phrase, why you want Biden, Harris, Walz to win, right? So I'll start with Representative Gina and just popcorn it. And then before that, thank you for being here with us. And then we'll start moving to the next panel that we're going to talk about housing.
Because our kids deserve access to opportunity to get world-class education.
If we want all children, no matter their zip code, their race, their nationality, to have access to opportunities, we know that education is key. So we have to support this teacher and, of course, our Vice President Harris.
Thank you. Max?
If we want to move forward and make progress and continue to make progress for our people and for all kids here, for all children and students here in the country, we need to work hard to elect Harris and Walz, and then continue to work hard to support them implement an agenda.
Thank you. Fred?
Hands down, I believe the economic engine of America is Latino and diverse communities of color. And I think this administration will invest in these communities to have equitable access to thrive.
Thank you. So don't forget, sign up. We have a QR code. If you want to donate, if you want to volunteer, let us know. And I'm very excited that we have Representative Adriano Espaillat. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
You got it right.
Okay. Thank you for making time. I know you were also watching the announcement of the VP. You were very excited. But one of your main topics is also with housing. And we're also going to be having Senator Ana Hernandez from Arizona joining us. And we'll start out with you, and welcome.
Thank you, Enrique. And thank you for all that have tuned in and been part of this exciting discussion. Wow, what a time, what a moment are we living in America, right? We just saw our ticket. We're heading into the convention in Chicago. What an exciting time to be part of the groups of folks in the Latino community and the greater community that are involved in making sure we protect democracy and we protect opportunity and hope for our families. And what a great pleasure it was to see a teacher, un profesor, un maestro. Sabemos cómo los maestros son tan importantes en nuestra cultura, para nuestras familias, para nuestros niños. Y tener un maestro es un gran privilegio como candidato a la vicepresidencia. What a great privilege to have a teacher on the ticket. We just saw for 4 years what Dr. Biden did as the first lady, being a teacher, and the emphasis that she placed on education, and having now in the future a teacher as a vice president of the United States is a wonderful and great opportunity. And not just any teacher. Obviously, Governor Walz was a leader in the classroom and in the school system. And with students, he was a ray of hope that allowed them to move forward and grow. And so this is a great moment. We must be all laser focused in the next 91 days. I know that many people will have the opportunity to hear the platform, to debate the strengths and what we need to do better in our platform. But we must be laser focused in making sure that everybody gets out to vote and that our communities felt through the power, the unlimited power of the vote. And so that's going to take us all coming together from East Coast to West Coast, from Maine to Florida and Texas, to make sure that we all get everyone, abuelita, los jóvenes, nuestros hijos, nuestros nietos, a votar. They must all come out to vote. Housing is also a major need of our communities. Many people pay over 50% of their income for rent. They are not homeowners. We have obviously a homeless situation, crisis across the country. People that are unhoused across the country in all the states. And this is an issue that since perhaps the Reagan years, the federal government dramatically withdrew from. And it's impacting families, entire families, not even individuals, it's families and seniors and children. And so this team will make sure that we're looking at housing and investing in housing as we should. It's not a cheap investment, but it is an important investment for the families of America. So I want to thank you all for sharing your ideas, and I could feel the energy with all the speakers. What a great moment in history. Let's take this moment by storm. Vamos adelante, nunca hacia atrás.
Thank you, Representative. And we also have Senator Ana Hernandez from Arizona, who's been a champion in housing in Arizona. And I want to ask you, Ana, how can our community get involved? And one of the big problems, and we've seen this in the different polls, has to do with affordable housing. People like, I can't pay my mortgage or I can't pay my rent. But what does the Harris-Walz administration need to look at a national level? Because you've been doing a lot of work at a state level, but what would your suggestions be with all of this?
Yeah, thank you, Enrique, for inviting me, and thank you for allowing me some space to join. I actually was really excited with the VP as you mentioned, working on housing. Just want to highlight that Governor Walz signed in Minnesota a $1 billion housing bill with also historic tenant rights package. And he put, not him, he signed the bill that their legislator worked on to put in additional housing and homelessness resources. So it's really thrilling to see someone like Governor Walz at the federal level that has been committed to making housing more affordable through many different paths. And as he continues this path forward, what I would say at the federal level where we need some support is we need to look at ways to reduce the federal interest rates so that our communities can access those loans to become homeowners. On the rental side, we need to expand our number of rental choice vouchers, specifically out here in Arizona, right? We have to be working with our Congress to make sure that we're streamlining that, making it as efficient as possible, so that we also encourage more landlords to participate in that program on the rental side. I was very happy to see that the administration currently, and I feel very confident that the Harris and Walz ticket would also look into continuing to do work around tenants' rights and doing targeting those corporate landlords that are monopolizing the rents and increasing the rents for our communities. So those are a couple of things that I think of that we can use at the federal level, along with looking for more ways to get grant funding into first-time homeowners or down payment assistance programs that we could really use at the local level. A lot of the housing decisions are done at the local level, so we really need the backing of our federal administration to really encourage cities and towns to really look at innovative ways to remove the barriers that will make building housing more affordable, because that's where it really matters. So, and it's on our communities, like we should be getting involved. This is why voting in this election is going to matter so much. And the enthusiasm that exists at the top of the ticket, we need to carry it all the way down, because we have so many important elections on the ballot coming in November that are really going to change shape the future of housing in our communities, at the city level, at the state level, and at the federal level. So, that was what I would say for the moment.
No, thank you. And I know both of you are very excited, and we have other guests that are coming in. But before we leave, like in 20 seconds, what would you tell those homeowners or those that are renting that are like, what is next for me? Why should I vote for Harris Walz? In 20 seconds, what would you tell them? And then Representative Espaillat.
I say that this is an opportunity to create the path for our communities to pursue the American dream and establish the first step in generational wealth.
Thank you, Ana. Representative.
Protección para los inquilinos y oportunidades para ser dueños de su propia casa. Opportunities for tenants and home ownership. And let's reinvent HUD.
Thank you both for being here with us. And please share this with all your followers, your community, so we can do that. Next, we're going to start talking of an issue that is very important for Latinos that we saw in the different polls. And it has to do with the environment, because we don't think it's a hoax, right? We know it's something that is true. We know that those that are living in Houston have problems with severe weather, storms, snow. Those of us that are in Arizona, extreme heat. We have people that die because of extreme heat. So this is changing, right? The climate change is a reality, and I want to introduce Ana Tovar, Arizona Corporation Commissioner, Alexander Isdale, he's a Latino climate advocate, and Ramon Cruz, immediate past national president of Sierra Club. So welcome. And I want to know why you're excited to see this ticket, the Harris Walz ticket, and how is it going to have any effects on the environment, and what are the threats that we are facing, right? I just think of the Paris Agreement with Trump that we left, and then with Biden we went back. So what are your expectations with this ticket? Ana.
Yes, well, thank you, Enrique, for having us on. As you mentioned, climate change is a monumental issue, especially for our Latinos communities. I know that Unidos did a poll recently, and it stated that over 50% of Latinos feel that the climate change has a serious problem that is impacting their lives now. So one thing that I strongly believe with the Harris ticket is in regards to they'll continue in moving us forward with protections, with the environment, creating stable, good jobs, good paying jobs in a clean energy transition economy. I think that is something that is super important that they've committed to. Others have been cleaning up the environment to reduce health problems such as asthma. I believe also in regards to, the issues that are affecting us, are not only the heat issues, but again, we see it on the news. We're seeing it right now in Florida with the floods, the extreme weathers that are happening all across the nation. And, as Latinos, we're disproportionately affected by these areas that are hit by extreme, weather, whether it's drought, whether it's high temperature, whether it's flooding, along those other things. One thing that I'm truly working on here in Arizona as a commissioner is air and water pollution. One doesn't think that we live in 2024 that we would have such issues of safe and reliable water. But as we've seen across the nation, especially in Flint, Michigan, safe and reliable water is an issue. And here in Arizona, it is in regards to forever chemicals. So those are the chemicals that are staying in our water. I've been working with that all across Arizona and making sure that all of our communities have safe and reliable water as well too. So thank you for having me on. And this is such an important issue that is near and dear to my heart, because as you know, in my early 20s, there was a rare form of leukemia that affected my life, that put my life in danger. And that was caused by an environmental toxin. So it really threw my life into a tailspin. So, since then, I've been devoted in making sure that representation matters for my Latino community, and making sure we're doing the right things so that they don't have to go through these issues in the future.
Oh, thank you, Ana. And Alexander, what do you think are the main threats?
Well, I think that Commissioner mentioned several of them, so did you. But extreme heat, basically natural disasters on steroids is the main threat. You have wildfires in Canada and in California that they break records every year. We're breaking heat records every single year for the last 16 years now. Summer, I live in Florida, in the South, in the Sun Belt is unbearable. If you don't have AC, and then on top of that, we have, legislation, if speaking of threats, in the state of Florida that does not protect workers, most of them Latino, Black and brown, community workers, from extreme heat. They want to not make their employer give them water. How completely inhumane. So the threats are compounding. They affect other issue areas. We don't live in a bubble, and we don't live on one issue. We live on every issue. So there's housing, there's climate gentrification. For example, in Miami, they're trying to move people in Liberty City, for example, who've been there for generations, right? People of color, Black people, because it's in a very good central location. It's away from the ocean, so it's safer, right? So they want to just move these people out like they don't matter and basically completely gentrify that area. They've already done it in other parts. And it's happening everywhere that I go, on top of the fact that we have a serious homeless situation. So I will say this, 8 out of 10 Latinos, 8 out of 10, 80% of Latinos in this country, US Latinos, favor climate change being a top priority issue. 56% of 38 million of us Latinos suffered a major weather event in the last year. Okay, so this thing is beyond here. We need to do something about it. And what this administration done, when I'm talking about Biden and Harris, they passed legislation, the infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. There are things that are already happening in the works. There's billions of dollars in financing out there. And if this administration wins, and I believe that they will, and I truly hope so, you're going to see a major difference. And what this will look like 20 or 30 years ago, that this country can look amazing in 30 years. So I'm all about positive messaging. I'm all about looking at the workforce opportunities here to get people, even former coal miners, right, that teach them how to install solar panels. You understand? So it's all about finding solutions, all about working with the private sector, academia, your nonprofits, government, etc. And I believe that one side of this is completely for doing that, and the other side wants to deny it and basically just reward the fossil fuel industry and live in the past. So I'm all about moving forward, Enrique.
Thank you, Alexander. Ramon, going on what Alexander just mentioned, what do you think it will affect Latinos the most related to climate issues if the Harris-Walz ticket does not get elected, right? So they understand the problem of not getting them elected.
Yes. Well, first, buenas noches to everyone. You know, it's great to be here, and it's great to be part of this event with so many great people, inspirational people that have done so much in so many areas. You know, in terms of your question, you know, climate change obviously affects everyone, but affect vulnerable and disadvantaged communities much more. Vulnerable populations like children and the elderly. So, you know, climate justice is extremely important. And Latinos also live in many of these vulnerable areas that are not only prone to disasters and extreme climate events like Anna and Alexander have you know, already expressed, but also more likely to live in areas with a lot of pollution. And so it is important that we continue to have an administration that cares about this. You know, and Alexander mentioned the infrastructure bill and the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that has already a lot of focus for these communities. But the Biden-Harris administration pushed forward with the what is called Justice 40 initiative, that it's to ensure that 40% of those of the revenues and the funding that is available to deal with climate issues that go to the communities that need it the most. So this is something that Vice President Harris has been a champion, not only in this administration, but actually in the past when she was in California, you know, being able to face corporations that are prosecuting polluters. It is very important, you know, that she went and prosecuted all companies like ExxonMobil. You know, compare that with Trump, that put the head of that corporation to lead the Department of State. You know, so we're talking about, you know, completely different. I wish we had more time to you know, speak about the Paris Agreement and all the other things that a Harris-Walz administration would be. But we're definitely very excited in the environmental community for this ticket.
So 2 things before you guys leave. And first, thank you for participating. In 20 seconds or less, like, what should people do in order to get Harris and Walz elected? And what should be the main issue related to climate change that they should focus on?
That's a great question. First, I would say register if you haven't registered. And if you have registered, double check your registration and make sure you're ready to go and where you're going to be going in November for voting. Second, I would say in regards to environmental and climate justice, it's a public health and human rights issue. And this alone, I think, is the ticket in regards to Harris-Walz and making sure that our Latino community is not left behind and that we are provided with the equal protections that we so rightly deserve.
Thank you. Ramon?
Well, Alexander is on the focus. So Alexander, go on.
Yeah, I would say as far as voting, talk to people, talk to your family, talk to friends, have conversation, be open, don't judge, talk about the issues, and let's mobilize our communities. I mean, we can win, we're in a majority, especially Latinos. And as far as climate, I think an emphasis on workforce development, an emphasis on solutions, an emphasis on working with different stakeholders and different actors, that's the winning strategy. And I will say one more quick thing. I want to give a shout out to Governor Tim Walz. coach, teacher. You know, I relate so much with his story. So I'm just so happy with this pick. Thanks.
Thank you. Ramon?
And I would say, you know, something very important in terms of climate, you know, supporting, you know, let your opinions know, and support, you know, renewable energy, electrification. All of these are the technologies of the 21st century. We cannot go back to the technologies of the 20th century, 19th century, when you think about coal and fossil fuels. So let your elected officials know that this is important. Know that in the Democratic Party, we need to let them know that these issues are important. And so in terms of what to do, I mean, Anna and Alexander already said it, but, you know, get excited, volunteer, donate. You know, if you care about your children's future, I know you do. If you care about the planet, I know you all do. And the economy, I know you all do. So it's important to bring your friends to donate and ensure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are in the White House next year.
Thank you. And I'm very happy to see a great group. Yamelisa Jimenez, she's the CEO in Counseling Solutions from Pennsylvania. Dr. Mauricio Gonzalez, that a lot of us followed during COVID. It's great to see you. And Aaron Boslun, Men for Choice advocate. So I want to start out with a question that has to do with prescription drugs, right? We know that a lot of people were paying between $300, $400 a month on insulin, but there was a cap to put it on $35. And I know this is one of your specialties, Dr. Mauricio, and I want to get your impact. Like, how has this impacted the Latino community in the U.S. because of this decision that the Biden-Harris administration took?
Yeah, no, Enrique. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind invitation. I've been listening to these amazing panelists, and I feel inspired already. So this is definitely a great experience for all of us. Listen, we don't have clear statistics as to what the impact has been with this cap of insulin. But let's be honest, for us who are in the clinic, this is a huge thing. We've heard from multiple families that say that this has created so much savings in their lives. So I would say that it's been stellar for most people. Now, the challenges ahead, you know, remain. How are we going to improve the health of Latinos moving forward? And I think one thing that I'm particularly excited about Kamala is the fact that she knows about the power of prevention. And she knows that we have to move from a culture of chronic condition management to a culture of chronic health preservation. And I'm very excited. I know that she's spoken about this. And I think for Latinos, this has a unique interest because the incidence of things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and fatty liver happened 10 to 15 years earlier in our community. So those things, chronic disease to chronic health, and reducing doing this cap on medications, life-saving medications as insulin, it's been great. It's been great for Latino families.
Thank you. I want to move towards the part of Roe v. Wade, right? Roe v. Wade changed with the Supreme Court that we have, right? And in Arizona, it was somebody could go to jail because they decided to terminate their pregnancy. And Aaron, you've been an advocate, Men for Choice, that women should have that decision and it should not be government interfering. I want to get your perspectives on this, and what could Latinos also do in order to switch to going back to Roe v. Wade at least?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Enrique. And this has been such a phenomenal panel. And everything here that's happening is so important in the effort to elect Kamala Harris as president of the United States. The basic factor here is that the majority of Americans, men and women, believe that everyone should have the freedom to control their own body. As Governor Walz has been saying so eloquently, it's really weird that there's such an interest among so many men to try to control something that they know nothing about. The average man knows nothing about pregnancy. They don't know what a fetus looks like at 6 weeks compared to 16 weeks. And why is it that they're so concerned with something that they know nothing about? Last year in the United States, there were about 1,600 votes taken to ban and criminalize abortion. 86% of those votes were taken by men. And yet, if you go to your average pro-choice rally, even though the majority of men are pro-choice, you'll see it's probably 90% women on that pro-choice side. And you look right across where you have the weird counter-protesters, and 90% of those people are going to be men. So why are men so preoccupied with this? We know it's not about concern with children. If it was about concern with children, they would care about the rate of maternal mortality in this country, like Vice President Harris says. They don't care about that. They would be trying to give free lunches to kids in schools like Governor Walz has done. They don't care about that. So why is it that when they don't support any of the policies that support life for children, they're suddenly so concerned when it comes to what women can do with their own body? And it's just weird. It doesn't make sense. There's a different vision, and it's not one that I think most of us share, where the government has that kind of power. As far as what Latinos can do, I think there's a really important role here, and we see it in our Men for Choice Youth Fellowship. And I want to shout out Marcus Cenaceros, who's one of our Men for Choice fellows. He's here tonight. He's the youngest elected official in the state of Arizona, and the importance of peer-to-peer, person-to-person outreach. We don't necessarily have the ability. Well, Mauricio has like 2 million Instagram followers, so maybe he does, but most of us don't have the ability to do mass outreach of public opinion, but we can talk to our brothers, our sisters, our moms, our dads, and the importance of person-to-person connection, because especially for guys have never thought about this issue. Guys don't have any sense what this is. They might have a sort of sense, they've heard in church abortion is bad, but also it doesn't seem like an abortion ban is a good thing. And it is so important to remind people, especially in the Latino community, what happens when the government's able to seize this kind of power and where it goes, and that isn't the kind of country we want to live in.
And Melissa, like from your perspective, like on these two issues that we talked about, like for you, what would you stress to those that are watching, like saying, okay, if Harris, Walz make it and they become president and vice president, what are you foreseeing on the health sector, and what do you think is going to change?
Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I am honored to be here and to speak with all of you. And just even listening to the two topics that we're speaking about, I am a type 1 diabetic since the age of 10. So capping insulin for me and having it be across the board, not only to Medicare recipients, even though that is huge, and I'm glad we took that step, but capping it across the board is understanding that that is providing me with the access to staying alive. It's not only just having a medication. My medication is not optional. If I go 2-3 days, I'm in the hospital, and if nothing is done, if there's no interventions further than that, I will die. And that is the case for millions of Americans right here living in the United States. So it's understanding the importance of life-sustaining medications, of interrupting the drug, the drug organizations that are pushing the prices to places where it's unaffordable. It's not realistic for a family to be able to spend $400, $500, $600 on a daily regimen of medication, and that could be for any type of chronic disorder. So absolutely having the backing of Kamala Harris, and now with her pick Walz, is understanding that the health of the United States is not just the citizens, not just the residents, it's everyone living in United States. Everyone should have access to health. Everyone should have access to medications as needed. Everyone should have access to interrupting the chronic illnesses before they even start. Is living a healthier lifestyle, is being able to have access to healthy foods, and for children to be fed in schools. And then if we segue into, what we were speaking about, women's right to choose, as a woman, I absolutely agree. They don't know. Men have no idea what they're actually stopping us from, you know, and religion and state should have nothing to do with one another. This is the purpose of having built the United States, with allowing freedom of religion, not one person's religion or one group of people that have a belief about abortion or not abortion. That has nothing to do with choosing life. That has nothing to do with a woman making the choice to terminate a pregnancy. It has nothing to do with a medical professional prescribing or having a conversation with their patient privately about what is most effective for that individual and their body. So persons that are pregnant would be the only person with the conversation of their health professional, whether that will be appropriate or not. That should not be a conversation that happens anywhere within the government walls.
Yeah, Melissa, and I'll start with you. In 20 seconds or less, I would like, before we start letting the other panel join, misinformation. How does misinformation affect this election, especially on the health issues? And I know, Mauricio, you dealt a lot with this during COVID, so I want you to address that part. But let's start out with Melissa, and then with Aaron, and then we'll finish off with Mauricio. And thank you for being here with us. Go ahead, Melissa. Yeah, Melissa, sorry.
Okay, because I was going to say there is a Melissa on.
No,
so,
yeah, Melissa.
Not a problem. In 20 seconds, honestly, when you go to the polls, make sure that you have done your homework. Vote for the party and the candidate that has encouraged you to learn about the topics that are being spoken about, the things that are important to you. So anything to do with misinformation is individuals choosing not to go and do their own research. It is extremely important to not only make your own decision. So my push, you know, in general and in the community isn't about a candidate, but tonight it is, because we truly are choosing the future of not just us, our children, but their children. This election is extremely important. So knowing the facts is going to truly get us in the places where we need to go. So definitely doing the research, learning more, and wanting to, you know more about what is important to each individual choosing to vote.
Thank you. Aaron?
I would say, and I especially say this to the men with us tonight, because the women already get it, to call out misinformation around abortion. When Donald Trump and J.D. Vance say things like, you know, the average abortion is happening at 8 months and 3 weeks, like, you know, somehow women are carrying a pregnancy for that amount of time with the morning sickness and the, you know, the toll on their body, and then getting to that point and just deciding, changed my mind, or that abortions are happening after birth, which is so ridiculous. I don't even want to say it unless I'm calling it out. But it's really important that people realize that only 19% of the country wants abortion banned in all cases, including no exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. But not 19% includes J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, and it's the tail wagging the dog. And so we need to show people how extreme they are on abortion, and that abortion is a private decision, not to be regulated by the state, not the weird fever dream they've made it out to be.
Thank you. Mauricio?
Well, just like climate change impacts underserved communities the most, it is exactly the same with misinformation and disinformation. It always hurts the people that have less resources. And I have these fresh numbers in my mind because I actually just wrote an article about the power of social media medical information for Latinos. And I'm going to tell you this much. Latinos who are exposed to misinformation, especially on social media, are less likely to get vaccinated against flu, and they're less likely, you know, the female Latinas, obviously, to get mammograms. So yeah, it's a big, big thing. Now, why am I excited about Kamala and Walz? Well, first of all, I was asked by a dear friend of mine, physician, to join a roundtable of healthcare leaders on social media for the White House when she was vice president. And she agreed on this roundtable. And I know that she cares about disinformation impacting the health of millions of people. So I'm pretty excited about that. And the future looks bright.
Thank you, Mauricio. and we'll keep in touch. So next we have one of the things that we're going to be talking about is safe neighborhoods and gun control. And I want to welcome Selena Torres and Daniel Hernandez. Thank you for being here with us. And I want to start out with like owning a gun and things that happen. And I'll share something. When I was in high school, I got my aunt, my cousin, and myself, we were kind of taken hostages with a guy with a gun, right? Convinced them to let my aunt and my cousin go. But I was with him probably like an hour walking through town, and he would put the gun to my head. And I'm like, that kid should have never had access to a gun. And I know, Daniel, you went through a very similar experience with Gabby Gifford, right? And you've been an advocate for gun control. So I want to start out with that because I think there is a debate when they say that there should be background checks and things like that, that they say, oh, you're taking away my right, my Second Amendment right. And that's not the reality, right? It's not saying you shouldn't be able to own a gun. So let's start with that. And thank you for being here with us. And we're a little behind schedule, so
be quick, which is not my strong suit. Well, thank you, Enrique, and thank you to Unidos for having me tonight. I am in my bedroom because my dogs are barking, so you get to see all of my toys because I'm a big nerd. But I am so excited to be here with Unidos. I was actually with Janet Murguia at the Vice President's residence a few days ago in Washington, D.C. at the Celebration for Latino Leaders. And I am so excited about what's going on with today's pick of Governor Tim Walz, because when we're talking about the issue of gun violence prevention, which is what we are talking about, we're not talking about removing people's guns and just taking them away for the sake of taking them away. What we're talking about is making sure that we have responsible gun ownership and making sure that we keep guns out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them. So it starts with, I think, one of the most basic things, which is passing red flag laws, which is something that Governor Tim Walz just did in Minnesota recently. So when we're talking about reducing the easy access and availability for people who shouldn't have firearms, it is something that Kamala Harris, as vice president and as attorney general in California, has been committed to, keeping the guns out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them. So that's done by a couple of different ways. One is the red flag laws that we have seen get passed in multiple states, including Minnesota, by Governor Tim Walz, but also things like expanded background checks. You know, I'm really grateful that Governor Walz and Vice President Harris are committed to making sure we're reducing gun violence, which has a disproportionate impact on communities of color. Like you mentioned, Enrique, gun violence is not just a problem that happens in mass shootings like it did with me and with Gabby Giffords. This is an everyday problem that impacts the Latino community. And we know that in order to be able to get rid of this problem, we're going to have to work on it together. We're going to have to bring in gun owners. We're going to have to bring in people who are in the military. We're going to have to bring conservatives, Republicans, independents, and everyone across the entire spectrum to understand some basic facts, which is every day, more than 100 Americans are killed because of gun violence, but there are hundreds that are injured, and those who are left with permanent scars, both physical and mental, because of gun violence in this country. So in order to move forward, we have to start working together by bringing people together and not saying we are going to go after gun owners, but instead we're going to bring them into the fold to make sure they're a part of the solution. You know, there was a really interesting tweet that came out a few hours ago when Governor Walz was announced, and it was Kyle Rittenhouse, who has been somebody who, you know, participated in gun violence and murdered somebody. So he's going after Tim Walz and says he wants to take away your Second Amendment. And then we see immediately people posting photos of Governor Walz posing with his rifle and going out hunting. So, you know, for us, we have, I think, one of the strongest tickets on gun violence prevention, and I see Assemblywoman Torres is back with us, so I'll hand it off to her in a second. But we have one of the strongest tickets when it comes to gun violence prevention, not only because we have Governor Walz, who is a gun owner, a hunter, and somebody who's dedicated to passing better gun safety laws in his own state and now in the country, but we have the vice president, who has been instrumental in helping lead the creation of the first ever gun violence prevention office in the White House. And more importantly, helping shepherd the first real gun bill in over 30 years in the United States Congress with the passage of the Safer Communities Act, which was a bipartisan bill that has done so much to improve, but there's still a long way to go at the federal level. So I think as we're looking at this ticket, we're looking at the community and the safety that we have somebody in Kamala Harris who has dedicated her life to protecting vulnerable communities, especially communities of color. So thank you to Enrique and to Unidos for joining and making sure that Latinos are involved in this fight to make sure that we elect Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz as the next vice president and president of the United States.
Thank you, Daniel. Representative, thank you for Assemblywoman. Thank you for being back. I know you were having some trouble, right? Technology. We always have some issues. That's why we need to make sure everybody has access to broadband. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on with the administration when it comes up. So how does all this affect your community? Like, what are you looking at with gun reform? Like, what would you expect? And I know we could do some things at a state level, but what are you also expecting at a federal level from this administration, from the Harris-Walz administration?
So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about this really important election cycle. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Assemblywoman Selena Torres, and I represent an Assembly District 3 right here in the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada. When I'm not in Carson City, I'm a school teacher. So I'm in the classroom working with our kids every single day. So today is and this week for me really is all about back to school. Our kids start back on Thursday. So we're just getting ready for the start of the school year. And unfortunately, gun violence remains a pressing epidemic that really affects our communities and disproportionately impacts communities of colors like mine. Incidents of the tragic events like that which happened at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, compel educators nationwide, including those here in Las Vegas, Nevada, to take action and stand up. Unfortunately, it's an issue that hits too close to home. Here in Las Vegas, Nevada, in December of 2023, we had an incident at the university where there was an individual who came onto our campus and used gun violence. It was unfortunate that so many of us were making calls to our loved ones to check in and to see if they're okay. Schools and universities need to have the safety protocols necessary, and that's something that the Biden-Harris administration has already done, is making sure that they're investing in our schools and investing in our communities, making sure that we have access to those resources. It's really disheartening to see the Trump and JD Vance talk about how we need to just have more guns on our campuses when there's no evidence to suggest that that's going to make our campuses safer or our schools safer. There's so much that that can be done to ensure that our communities are safe, and that doesn't have anything to do with putting power back in the hands of the corporate gun lobby at the expense of our public safety. So I look forward to continuing to advocate for Vice President Harris and for Governor Walz to continue to impact policy and institute policy that's going to keep our communities safe.
Well, thank you, Daniel and Selena, for being here with us. And this is going to be a big issue, right? So we need to look into gun reform. We need to do certain things at state levels, but we also need to do a lot at a federal level. And it's going to require, like Daniel said, a combination, a coalition building. It can't just be one party. It has to be bipartisan, and we need to work together, right? Because this is something that's going to be very important. So I want to thank you both for being and sharing your points of view. And I know we're going to have other opportunities later on, but we just wanted to get this, like, all this excitement, and especially today with Tim Walz. Don't forget to donate. Don't forget to volunteer. And we'll move on to the next panel. So before we leave, 10 seconds to say goodbye.
Assemblywoman, you go first.
I just want to reiterate how important it is that all of us work together to make sure that we elect Vice President Harris and Governor Walz this election cycle.
And I will just end with thank you to UNIDOS for bringing us all together today. As a Latino, as a gay man, and as a gun violence survivor, I could not be more excited about working to make sure that we elect Kamala Harris, the first woman, the first person of color who is a woman as president, and then also Governor Tim Walz as the next vice president. So thank you for this opportunity, and see you in the next 90 days, knocking on doors and calling voters to make sure we get them elected.
Probably see you on Friday. Thank you for
see you on Friday.
Yeah. So we have two more topics that we want to talk about. One of them is voting rights, engagement, mobilization, and resources. And we have State Representative Danilo Burgos from Pennsylvania, which I got to meet a couple of weeks ago. We have Kat Vargas from Texas, Eddie Colguin, who is our state director in Texas for UNIDOS US Action Fund, and Senator Mo Dennis from Nevada. So welcome, the three of you. And I want to start out with conspiracy theories, right? That is one of the biggest threats in this election, has to do with conspiracy theories. Like for Latinos, where do we get the information? A lot of Latinos probably are looking at Spanish information, whether it's on their Facebook or Instagram or some sort of social media. Like I get it from my dad, right? Like he'll send me something and I'm like, no, okay, don't follow this. This is not true. So I want to get your point of view of what we need to do in this election, right, to combat misinformation, and also how to mobilize people and let them know what is the correct thing. And I'll let Eddie Colguin start out.
Yeah, well, thank you, Enrique, and you're doing a great job hosting. So thank you. Yeah, a lot of information is, right now, our Hispanic community gets our information through social media. My friend Kat Vargas has a lot more to say on that. But, you take example, the Olympics this past week. There were some rumors going around about some Olympians. There was rumors going around about the opening. And a lot of it was just rooted in misinformation and also disinformation, because those two are very different. And so whenever it comes to the Latino community, we have to make sure that whenever our tíos, our parents, our padrinos, everyone that we know, our friends, are sharing information that is accurate. So those of us that are watching right now, we're the ones that are in tune and very in the know of what's happening with the political process and the political landscape. And so whenever we see someone that we know and love share something that's just not accurate, it's incumbent upon us to step in and say, hey, that's not exactly true. Here's the actual information that is beneficial and will help you share much more accurate information. And so a lot of our community communicates, ear to ear, phone to phone, text to text, social media, DM to DM. So that's really where a lot of information comes from. And we have to be cognizant and make sure that we're paying attention to that and stepping in whenever we need to.
Thank you. Representative Danilo Burgos, like in Pennsylvania, we have a big population. Probably some think, oh, it's not that big, but it's actually a big population of Latinos, right? But there is a lot of misinformation also to them in this coming election. So what would you say, and what excites you, and how do you think we can change this narrative that is going on? Because that also gets our community to say, why should I go out and vote, right? When they get false information, and that just turns them off. It's like les apagas la pila, right?
Yeah, Enrique, great to see you again, my friend. Gracias a UNIDOS for bringing us all together this evening. And here in Pennsylvania, what excites us is Tim Walz. I just left the rally a few hours ago, and the man is 100% the real thing, the real deal. He's going to energize not just our base, but all communities across the board. And look, desafortunadamente, our gente, nuestra gente, le encanta el bochinche, and unfortunately, in social media nowadays, there's so much misinformation that is going to take all of us to repeat the true stuff, the real stuff, what UNIDOS is saying, what other organizations are saying, what the campaign is saying. Like it's interesting that we have the best economy in a while, and we are still, our candidates are trailing or even with someone that's a legitimate liar. As someone that has proven times over that he has misled, he has cheated his business partners, and he never passes up an opportunity to file for bankruptcy. So we need to share this information collectively and have the message that nuestra gente cuenta. And we need to make the difference. We cannot afford another term of the Trump presidency, because it's not gonna be productive for any of our communities. This man is telling us he wants to be a dictator, that we only need to vote one more time and he'll take care of the rest. He stacked the Supreme Court against real American values, and we have to defend our freedoms. We have to defend our states by voting. And Latinos across Pennsylvania are engaged. They are going to come out and vote, but we need to have the right message for them, and just repeat the success that the Biden administration has done for us. Thank you to President Biden and Vice President Harris. She's battle proven. She's ready to continue to lead our country.
Yeah, completely agree. And I'll go with the next question for Mo. A lot of people might be saying, okay, how can I help if I am in a red state or a blue state, right? And you're in Nevada, which Nevada is a swing state. So those that are in other parts of the country, how can they help and how can they mobilize?
Oh, thank you, Enrique. I think when you think of whether red or blue states, I think every state matters. Obviously in the electoral vote things, there's a few that are key, but everybody needs to be involved. And we were talking about earlier about who Latinos get their information from. It's those people that they love and trust, right? Which we have it incumbent upon us to be involved in the community, to know what the truth is, and that's how you can find out that truth. And so it doesn't matter where you're at. Every vote matters. I mean, I had the privilege of serving for 18 years in the legislature here in Nevada, but the first time I ran, I lost by 62 votes. If you don't think that I wish I would have worked a little harder, that it could have made that difference and I could have got elected that time, it made it so I had to work that much more harder the next time. But all of us need to make sure that we have all the right information, and that we need to make sure that we share that with those that we love, those that we associate with. We have the opportunity to serve in civic opportunities, right? We're involved in many different hearings and things. We need to make sure that the truth is always out there. And I look at the immigration issue. I worked on that at the national level with other state legislators, and we've been to the border and we've been to talk to Congress, and we talked to folks all over, both in Mexico and Canada. And the information that we're getting, that comes out of former president is totally false. So we need to know that information so that we can share that and people know what the truth is. And as we do that, people will trust us and will trust that, we need to get Kamala Harris and Governor Walz elected.
You're on mute, Enrique.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I know this is one of your expertise, like mobilization, but also misinformation. So what would you say to those young people? What can they do in this election? How can they help combat misinformation? And also some of it might just be generated on purpose, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, like you said, it's on purpose. And the best thing that, youth can do is we're on social media, whatever platform it is you're using, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, Threads, any of it, post on there and have those conversations. There's this big misconception that posting on social media isn't political action, but it is. That is our public square now. And it's where your friends and family are with you, and they're seeing what you're posting, and you are the best influencer to your friends and family. They already have that trust built in you. They care what you think, and you posting about these issues is important. And in states like mine, I'm down here in Texas, we're deep red, and it lets people know they're not alone in our states. And you help find your community that way, and you build your coalition that way of your friends, your neighbors, and then you can start mobilizing that way. You can start going and knocking on doors together. And it is so important for misinformation and having those conversations offline as well at your table. back in 2022, we had a whole lot of misinformation, especially targeted at the Latino community. And a lot of that was on YouTube. My mother-in-law is always on her phone, on YouTube, watching all the things. She's like, Mira, 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 look at this, look at this. But there were so many targeted ads for misinformation. And so it was our responsibility to make sure we helped her understand what was true, what wasn't true. So having those conversations, like Eric said, with your family in person as well, not being afraid to have that conversation at the dinner table, and knowing that for so many of these issues that are, our bread and butter issues in our community, there's just a lot of times it's a lack of awareness. It's a lack of, no one came and talked to me about it, so I didn't know. And again, you have that trust. You are the best influencer to your friends and family. You don't have to have this large following. I mean, even when I started my account, it's only been a year and a half. When I started at zero. I didn't, wasn't well connected, didn't have a background in politics or social media. And now Howdy has grown to 38,000 followers across platforms in that short amount of time. And I've become that trusted space for, a lot of my community now for that information. So I think that's the basic thing, is just knowing to get out there, to help people to know what is disinformation, be willing to have those conversations both online and off, but definitely do not discount how important having that conversation on social media it is. That is our public square, and it is taking political action to go and post on social media.
Thank you. So to close off this section, 10-15 seconds, what should Latino voters do in this election? And I'll start with Mo.
Sure, thanks. The most important thing, get out and vote, and make sure you take your family with you and your friends, and get everybody out to vote. We need to make sure that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz get elected, because all the things that are important to us, that are dear to us and to our families, are on the line this election cycle. It's very critical. So everybody needs to get out and vote, and take everybody with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kat?
I would say make the commitment to being uncomfortable, having uncomfortable conversations online and off, doing a little bit more than whatever you've done in the last cycle. That's what's going to push us over the edge, both in our state races and as well as the top of the ticket with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Thank you. Danilo?
Just get involved. We have 90, in a few hours, we'll have 90 days to keep our country on the right path. And as Latinos, we need to stop allowing them to use us as the punching bag, as the bad guy. Enough of talking bad about America. Let's get together. Let's work to make sure that Latinos show up on an election day, and let's go win, guys.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, there's something to do for everyone. If you're not comfortable knocking on doors, you can make phone calls. If you're not comfortable making phone calls, you can send text messages. If you don't want to send text messages, you can write postcards. We've sent out, or about to send out, thousands of handwritten postcards that we've been doing down here in the Rio Grande Valley out of McAllen, Texas, to newly registered voters. So we're doing everything we can to get out the vote and let people know that they need to show up to vote. So get involved however you can, whatever your comfort level is.
Thank you, Eric. And reminder to everyone, different ways you can donate, you can volunteer. There's different activities, and the link has been shared, and all of you can either sign up, phone banking, texting. You can also, like Eric said, writing postcards, right? Handwritten. That is very important. And to talk about the last issue, that is very important to many of us, because many of us have family members who are veterans, who have served, and we want to thank them for doing that. But we have a great team right here that we're going to be talking about. We have Rosy Torres, PACT Act lead advocate, U.S. Army spouse. We have Joanna Mendoza, retired U.S. Marine and board member of Vets Forward. And we have Ricardo Reyes, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, Common Defense Civic Engagement. So first of all, welcome the three of you for being here with us and talking about a very important group in the U.S., veterans. And I want to start out with a question related to the PACT Act of 2022. So what were the biggest political obstacles you and your husband faced trying to make this happen? And if you can briefly describe what it was, right? Because a lot of people might not know what the PACT Act was. So we're a little bit over time, but if we can make this like really quick, and then we can talk to the other panelists. Thank you. You're on mute, I think. No, we can't. So I'll move on to Joanna. Joanna, with Bets Forward, you were in the Marine Corps. So, and we were talking a little bit of, I think it was yesterday, or I don't remember if it was 2 days ago already, about women in the military, right? And what does Kamala Harris represent in this ticket, right? So for women who are serving, what is the impact of having Harris probably becoming the first woman president and being the leader of the armed forces?
Yeah, great question. First of all, thank you, Enrique, and to UNIDOS for the invitation. I mean, obviously, we know that this is going to be a historic election. I feel like we've been saying that since 2016, right? As we've been fighting back the weirdos and the crazies. But, you know, first to just kind of talk about Harris's legislative record and what the Biden-Harris administration did for veterans. And I'm sure Ms. Rosie Torres will talk a little bit about the PACT Act. But, you know, that was the largest expansion of veteran benefits that we have seen in such a long time. Over 700,000 veterans signed up and had access to healthcare, which, you know, I think there's a direct correlation from access to healthcare to the record low unemployment rate for veterans. When people feel good, they are active, they're involved in their communities, they're contributing members in their families, and most importantly, they're able to stay in the workforce, right? And so I think that access has done a world of good, and we can expect to see that in a Harris and Walz administration moving forward. The significance of Vice President Kamala Harris being at the highest level of government is not only historic but inspirational, especially for so many women who have, you know, paved the way, who have been trailblazers, and for those generations to come. So, you know, there's tons of excitement around it. I am personally excited, especially with the Women's Health Research Initiative, and a small portion of that funding will go to women veterans and research for menopause, postpartum care. We're talking breast cancer. So all that to say, there's tons of excitement.
I'm glad to hear that. And one of the things, Ricardo, we know that a lot of veterans need to go to see a doctor, mental health issues, but we know that veteran, like the VA in Tucson, they need more funding, right? Because if they are not receiving the funding that Congress gives, then you cannot treat veterans, right? So what are the impacts, and what are you hoping to see with a Harris-Walz administration related to all the issues that are going to help veterans get the treatment that they deserve?
Well, one of the important things that we have to remember is that when Trump was in office, he keeps trying to take credit for things that he didn't pass. He didn't do really much of anything for veterans, especially for our healthcare. The VA was a mess. During the end of the Obama administration, they actually passed a few things that helped us a lot, beginning with like choice and other things where if for some reason the VA, for example, I keep trying to get an appointment for the VA and it's like 2 months away, anything over, I believe, 30 days, I can go to a private doctor and then the VA pays for that. So those are things that were already passed before. Those are things that we would like to see maybe expanded. There's so many things that the veteran community needs. The veteran community has a higher propensity for suicide. I forgot what the exact number is, but something like 22 veterans a day commit suicide, which is way higher than the general population per capita. So we do need all these things. And today I was extremely excited to see the VP pick is Walz, because he himself was an active duty military member. So he understands the needs of our community. As far as also how does this impact Latinos? One of the things that Joanna and I wanted to mention is we feel like people think that veterans are a monolith. that veterans are all going to vote Republican because that's what you see on TV. That's what you see in the commercials. Trump high-fiving, someone in a freaking, in camo. Usually it's somebody who's stolen valor, but we won't go into that right now. But for us, we're trying to let people understand that the military looks like America. The military is, it's not just white, older male. It's brown, it's black, it's Asian. Women. And we all have, and not only that, so many, obviously, like different genders. Gay people have been serving in the military forever. So so just so people understand that, I know there's a lot of homophobia and transphobia that people were like, oh my God, these people can't serve. Some of the best people that I served with, in particular, a Marine is now, trans. She was one of the best Marines I ever had. So this idea that, the military is going to be this monolith that's strongly going to vote for Trump, that's not true. There's a lot of dissent, especially because of the way that he treated Latinos, because of the children in cages, because of the way he treated, the LGBT community, things like that.
Suckers and losers, calling us suckers and losers.
So we are very aware that our voices are maybe a little more trusted because of because of our service. And we just want to make sure that people understand that, we're here. We're very hardcore going for Harris, not because she's perfect. No, none of these people are going to be perfect, and that's just fine. Harris, she has some things that I probably don't agree with on, but I'd rather have somebody like that where we have a seat at the table and we can discuss things than Trump, who thinks he's an authoritarian. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So
5 cents.
Let's hear Rosie is back. Let's see if we can hear her audio. Let's see let's try it. No, okay. So she's having technical problems. It always happens. No worries. But thank you for being here. But I think Joanna, can you explain the PAC?
Yeah, so basically it was an expansion of healthcare benefits, and Mrs. Rosie Torres and her husband were impacted because of the exposure to burn pits. A lot of us served, including myself, were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and were exposed to, trash, chemicals, all kinds of stuff being burnt out there. And then, the military service members and those who were on those bases were ingesting all of these chemicals. It's caused brain cancer, throat cancer, lung cancer. There's so much that has been done through this PAC Act as a result of Mrs. Rosie Torres and her husband. She's an Army spouse, and she has my gratitude as someone who served for, deployed, who, was there during the time when these burn pits were going. A gratitude, just immense appreciation for the work that she's done. And I just want to add that, that will continue. If we have a Harrison Walls ticket at the top, you know for sure that you will have a commitment, a continued commitment to veterans, military service members, and their families, not only because of the work that the Biden-Harris administration done, but because of the things that will be done.
I also wanted to mention real quick, Enrique, that a lot of my military friends were very, very concerned when they saw the crowds at the RNC chanting for mass deportations. That was so hateful, but also very extremely sad. We have veterans who have been deported, and people don't understand that. There's a lot of veterans who are still deported right now, who were fighting to try to get back. Common Defense and, Vets Forward and other organizations are constantly. We have other connections with like LULAC, who are helping us try to get some of these veterans back. One of our best friends in Arizona, his name is Alex Murillo. He just got back about 2 years ago. He was deported for 10 years for a very small, because he had a possession of marijuana. So veterans all are trying to keep together, and we are trying to not let anybody get left behind. And it's going to be extremely difficult for something like that when we go to Congress and we lobby for things like deported veterans. And all the Democrats, for them, almost every Democrat that I talked to was, in favor of, I forgot what the bill is, I'm sorry, but it's a bill to try to get people back. And every Republican was against it because they think like, oh, this is a immigration bill where you guys are going to have people just running across the border to run to the nearest recruiter and join the military. Like very, very uneducated things coming from people who serve in our government.
I'm glad you brought that up. Oh,
she's back.
Yes.
Let's try it really quick. We need to wrap this up like in a minute. So
Go ahead, Rosie.
Oh yeah, sorry. I mean, look, the quickest thing I can say is that the PACT Act is an example of, you know, Latinos driving legislative change. It was a 13-year journey that started from our kitchen table. And it wasn't until we partnered with Jon Stewart and the 9/11 community that we were able to overcome those obstacles of we were facing with the gatekeepers in Congress, right? But it was this idea that the burden of proof was on the veterans and the bureaucratic inertia and the gaslighting and all those things that we faced for 13 years as a family and veterans across the country. And it wasn't until we slept on the steps of our nation's capital, and Eric was there with me for 5 nights and 6 days, that we changed history with the PACT Act. And so this is a perfect example of like not playing partisan politics on the backs of sick and dying veterans. And so we're grateful that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and all of the administration made sure that, you know, they were leaving no one behind. So the PACT Act, like I said, it was led by 2 Latinos, and we mobilized the community, we mobilized America, and we're just honored to have been part of that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for joining and talking about this important issue. And I just think of one of my uncles, right? He served in Vietnam, but the way he became a U.S. resident and then a U.S. citizen is he enlisted once he was able. He lived in Tampico, Tamaulipas, and decided to enlist and go fight in Vietnam. So we need to understand that also Latinos come from different backgrounds and they want to do something, and they are serving this country, right? So I want to thank you for your service, your family members, my family members, for being here, right? For serving. And before we leave and we close this off, 10-15 seconds of what should veterans do in this election?
Organize your families first. Talk to your nieces, your cousins, your nephews. Bring those younger Latinos in and talk about those things. It's taboo. I know we don't do it, but how are we going to prepare the next generation to take us forward? And the only way to do that is to get them involved now. I take my 8-year-old son everywhere. He knows about voting. He knows about the vice president and the president. So engage your family, mobilize, organize, energize.
Thank you.
I would say don't be afraid to speak up. I know when I was, when I first got out of the Marine Corps, I was, very kind of shy about my service. It was something I did. It wasn't something, who I am. But I think it's very important to let people know that, that veterans have different opinions, that veterans also will be here backing Kamala Harris. And if you don't know how to get involved, go to Common Defense. If you're a veteran and you don't know how to get involved, go to Common Defense. .us, get involved. We have all sorts of things that we need you guys to do for us, whether that's text banking, whether that's calling, whether that's even just bringing your friend to vote. So there's lots of things that you guys can do, and we'll help you get there.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the veterans and their families, they don't underestimate the power behind your voice. And I feel like the success we had with PACT Act was because we strategized and thought outside of the box. We partnered with community stakeholders, and we definitely used social media to our advantage and calling out those gatekeepers and just organizing and coalescing around the greater good. So if we did it in a 13-year amount of time, and we passed one of the largest pieces of historical legislation in the veteran space, know that every voice matters, so we can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. And I'm joined again with Renata, chair of our board of the UNIDOS US Action Fund. and we are going to wrap this up. But first, even though he was not able to be here because he was with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, is Rafael Collazo. He's our executive director. So he was going to be like in and out of all this, but hey, he got to be in Philly with the vice president and the governor. So, but Rafael, from here, thank you for all of this. Thank you for all your work and all of this. So, and I'll pass it to Renata so we can close.
Very excited. I am leaving so energized, Enrique. I know that I learned so much. This last panel was really inspiring and reminded me how diverse our community is, how complex, how multifaceted we are, and whatever experiences we bring into this political conversation, whatever convictions, I know that we share the values of a country that includes us, where progress, political, economic, and social progress for all of our communities across the US is possible. And that's what we're here for. And so I'm excited because I learned more to go back to my community, to speak about all the issues that are affecting my community, our communities. And I'm excited that I know today people are going to donate to the Action Fund so that we can continue our work in communities like Arizona and Nevada. We're going to learn more so we can continue to be very well-informed ambassadors for the issues that are at stake. And we're going to organize our families, and we're going to get out, vote, and do all we can to make sure that Kamala Harris becomes our presidenta. Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, Enrique, for your leadership and moderating today. Thank you so much.
I want to also thank backstage, Sonia, Melissa, their team, Dionelli, everybody that's backstage, because this wouldn't have happened without all that support. To our state directors, Jared in Florida, Esmeralda in California, and Eric in Texas, thank you for all the help in putting this together. I know this webinar that we did is going to help a lot of Latinos understand why they should vote for Harris and Walz, right? That was the main purpose. The other one is everybody needs to organize. Every vote counts. So we can't think my vote doesn't count. If you're in a blue state or red state, you can help out by donating, by phone banking, texting, etc. in swing states like Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Georgia is now becoming a swing state again with Harris on the ticket. So we have about 12% Latinos in Georgia, so we need to get them also.
Watch out for the South. Watch out, we're coming.
Yes. So thank you, everybody. Good night. It was 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 35 minutes. Sonia will be able to go to bed now in Dionelli because they're in the East Coast. And thank you, everybody, and we'll keep in touch. Good night.
Buenas noches. Gracias.
Buenas noches. Let's elect our presidenta.